Hello everyone and welcome back to MixBuzz TV mixing and mastering tutorials on YouTube. In this video, there ain't gonna be much to see. It's gonna be more of a podcast kind of thing. I'm not gonna show you any trick, so you don't need to stare at your screen. But I wanted to talk about something a lot of people seem to get confused about, and that is the difference between mastering and two-bus processing. I get dozens of emails every day, both from my clients and from subscribers, asking me, should I remove all my plugins from the two-bus if I send my mix for mastering? Or other variation I hear around, like, it's better not to use a master EQ or a compressor because that's a mastering engineer work. And that is complete bullshit. So let me clear this up once and for all. First, two-bus processing is mixing. Two-bus compression and EQ belong to the mixing stage, okay? Second, two-bus processing, it is not mastering. With that said, it is not mandatory to use a compressor and or an EQ on your two-bus when mixing. I personally do use them 99% of the time, but there have been projects where I didn't. Also, not only is it not mandatory to have 2 or 3 plugins or hardware units on your two-bus, but as a general rule, I'd say this process on the master fader shouldn't be too heavy-handed. I say this because I see absolutely crazy shit around. Like people start mixes with a compressor, EQ, saturator, multiband compressor, stereo enhancer, limiters, console emulation, all of this stuff in their master fader. And if you've been mixing for a decade and you know that's your go-to chain and you got consistent results by doing that, then more power to you. Just do it. But if you're a beginner and you just put all that stuff because you read somewhere that you're supposed to, don't do it. Do it if you feel like the need to. Like if your mix actually sounds better with the crazy processing than without. Pay attention. I said better, not just different. Because this is something that we fall into very often. If something sounds different, we assume it sounds better, especially if it adds high end, high mids, everything that is brighter. We immediately perceive it as better, and that's not the case. Anyway, let's say you have your stereo compressor and an EQ on your two-bus. Why would you remove them if you send the track to a master engineer? If the mix sounds good to you, if you're happy with those plugins or hardware units on the two-bus, then leave them on. It is your mix. The mastering engineer will have to do a lot less work to make you happy if you send a mix that you already like. Now, let's say your mix is heavily compressed and the mastering engineer tells you you have no dynamic, the mix sounds squashed, you should remove your compressor. This is a tricky situation because he might be right. He might be right because if you put a stereo compressor on your master fader in order to try to get your mix loud, and this will be apparent, that's not good. You shouldn't care about loudness when you're mixing. The mastering engineer will take care of that. And if you choose to send a track to a mastering engineer, is because you know he's going to be doing a better job than you at bringing the track to commercial levels. So why the hell would you try to do it yourself? The point is, two-bus compression is not about loudness. You don't use a two-bus compressor to achieve loudness. It's about tone, it's about feeling, it's about gluing the element in the mix together. It's about density and many other things, but it is not about loudness. It shouldn't be. And for the same reason, you can put anything you want on your two-bus to make the mix sound the way you want. But one thing that I advise you to avoid is brick wall limiters like L2 or Pro L. Why? Because those are meant to control overshooting peaks. And you shouldn't A, have this problem, clipping I mean, if your gain staging is good. And B, the brick wall limiters are meant to be transparent. So you're not putting brick wall limiters for color or tone or anything but level. And again, if you're sending the track to a mastering engineer, leave that to him. Someone could argue that some brick wall limiters do add a certain aggressiveness to some mixes, and I agree. I did use them a few times for this specific reason, but I started doing it after 10 years of mixing when I was pretty confident about what I was doing. And we are talking about 1 dB of gain reduction, okay? Not more than that while mixing. Speaking of mastering, there's another misconception that I want to address, which is that mastering is only about making the song as loud as possible, fix the mixes problem, and balance the overall EQ of a song so that it translates well on many systems as possible. And that is all true, but maybe not the as loud as possible part, but just louder, yes. But mastering is not just that. The idea that this is all mastering is comes probably from the fact that nowadays we produce more singles and less albums. And so the other part of mastering is often overlooked. Mastering is about taking a number of songs that have to coexist in the context of an album, an EP, whatever you want, and gently ironing out the unavoidable little differences between songs, if the mix are well done, due to arrangement, BPM, instruments used, and so from song to song, there can be small adjustments that need to be done. For example, match the low end of a given song with the others, or how bright one song is compared to the others, or stereo field manipulation. And if the mixes are good, this is done by the mastering engineer in the most transparent way possible. Mastering is not about mangling with processing a shitty mix to try to make it sound half decent, but super loud at any cost. I like loudness, don't get me wrong. We are very far from ending the loudness war, and we have to be competitive with levels. This is just the reality of things. But if a mix master doesn't sound good first, and it's just loud crap. Nobody likes that, okay? So if you're mixing with compressor or EQ on your 2-bus, that's part of the sound of your mix. You should leave it on and print your mix with it. But don't use compression on the 2-bus for level, for loudness. That's not why we use 2-bus compression. Lastly, a brief touch about levels. How much headroom do you have to leave for the mastering engineer to be able to work? I've seen crazy things here, like you have to leave 12 dB. No, you don't. This is pretty simple. Even a couple of dB are enough. If the mastering engineer needs more, he'll simply lower the mix to what he needs, because we are all working at 24-bit and there's no negative side effects in doing so. But again, if you end up with a mix that peaks at -2 and you don't use a brick wall limiter, then you're fine. If you did use a brick wall limiter and you're at -2 dB, but if you remove it, your mix clips, that's not okay. You have no reason to have your mix too hot. I, for example, like to land on the 2-bus pretty low, and that's because I usually have pretty colored bus compressors on the master fader. Usually I have my hardware API 2500 or an SSL or other hardware compressors, and I like to have headroom to be able to use the makeup gain of such machines because, well, that's one of the reasons because I use them in the first place. So an example, I usually end up around -16 dB and I push 10 dB of makeup gain on my API 2500 because, well, it just sounds good. This way I'm capturing my mix at -6 peak level. See, everyone's happy. Last thing is, if you're mastering one song yourself, in this case, should you do everything on your 2-bus or should you open another project and master your tracks separately? It doesn't make any difference. It's your mix. If something doesn't work, fix it in a mix. And then bring the track to a level without destroying it. You want to do it in the same project, different project, it makes no difference. Just don't open another project just because you feel like you have to. Just because you feel like you have to put extra processing because you're, quote, mastering. You're not mastering. The most important aspect of mastering is the fact that another pair of ears, trained ears, other than yours, are listening to your mix in a great environment with great monitoring. If you take this out of the equation, it's not mastering anymore. It's just you fucking around with your own mix again. And don't do it. If you're happy with how the mix sounds, just bring the mix to an okay level. And there's no need to do anything else, to put any extra processing on. Okay, so like I said, this wasn't really a video, more like a podcast thing, but I wanted to touch upon these points because I received so many questions about it, and I hope this was somehow useful and helped clarify a couple of points. Okay. If you liked the video, please don't forget to click the like button, support the channel by sharing the videos on your social media and forums, subscribe if you haven't already, and see you next time.